the devotion to digital brands, moderated by Adam Najberg, who runs digital at the Wall Street Journal, obviously a traditional content provider. And I would like to welcome up Adam Najberg from the Wall Street Journal for our next panel. Adam. Come on, one more time. All right. Welcome, Adam.
All right, let my eyes get adjusted to the bright lights here in the big city. So today's panel is being a digitally devoted brand. We're going to be talking about innovations in building and retaining audiences, and we'll look at things such as how do you create this content, where do you place it, how do you target your message, how do you target it across Asia. There is no Asia, there's individual countries. And also, we want to talk about being disruptive. It's a word and expression that we use all the time, but I want to understand it with specific examples. On this panel with me today will be Mark Liversidge, Head of Marketing for Asia Pacific at Hilton, who just had a new addition to his family. Damien Cummings, the Chief Marketing Officer, Asia Pacific for Philips. Stephanie Hoof, Regional VP Marketing Communications and Government Relations at Ericsson, and Ivy Wong, CEO of Viss Mobile, an upstart company who will be enlightening us about what they're up to. Thank you guys. Please come on stage, sit down, and enjoy. We're going to make this fairly interactive, and we're going to leave lots of times for questions, and we're going to be asking you guys to do a little bit of polling with us as we start. Thanks again for being here, guys. So just to start, in the audience, it's hard for me to see, but how many people in the audience have a Facebook page, either themselves or professionally? Raise your hand. And how many of you have a Twitter account? Okay. Weibo, fewer hands. WeChat, Vine, Line, Kakao. Okay, I'm not going to remember all this, but thank you for raising your hands. It's good exercise so you don't sit here for 45 minutes. Okay, we're promptly going to forget this. So let's start, and let me just pull out my notes. We were preparing for this, and I asked each of the panelists to be specific because I hate when panels talk about theory. So if you are a digitally devoted brand, if you're trying to innovate in building and retaining audiences, the first thing I would not think of is a B2B company. When you're trying to reach consumers, they're fickle creatures, right? But when you are a B2B company, largely B2B company, you're talking to experts, people who understand what you do. You guys at Ericsson are doing something really different. There's no hard sales pitch. Can you just talk us through a little bit what you're actually doing and how it relates to your business?
Sure. Sometimes there's a sales pitch, but we're certainly doing a lot in content, and we've been producing content for a number of years now. But I guess what you're finding interesting is we've been producing documentary films for a few years. And we've got a couple of good reasons for doing them. For one, people who don't understand Ericsson, we build the networks. So if you're using all the social that you're doing, all the internet that you're browsing, it's running over networks that are built by Ericsson, particularly the mobile networks. And for us, it's really important that we understand how these networks are going to be used, and we want to influence and shape how other industries can adopt mobile and can adopt internet. So in 2011, we produced a full-feature documentary film called Press, Pause, Play. It was screened in film festivals all around the world. It won some awards, and of course it's still available on social. But the reason was really to start a dialogue and a conversation about the impact of digital. What is it doing to the quality of content that people are producing? What does it mean when you democratize content? And this year we've just soft launched a documentary on Myanmar. And again, there's no hard sales pitch. It's really about the people's voices of the country and their aspirations for how their life might improve when they have access to telecom. And for us, it's important for a couple of reasons. We want a more emotional connection, with our industry and with what telecoms can deliver. And we want to manage risk. So we don't want our investors jumping up and down the minute something goes wrong in Myanmar and saying, why are you guys in there in the first place? You should get out. We want them to realise that what we're doing there is actually for the better of society, and that there are real people and real stories that will be improved as a result of telecoms. So it's about a personal connection, and it's about, I guess, enlarging the conversation and keeping people focused on the bigger idea. And it's about, inspiring people to want to work for us, because, we're trying to reach out in a very competitive employment market, and, people want to go to a company that is doing good and that understands the impact. And so it's resonating a lot with our employees.
And if I could draw the other lady on the panel into this, ladies first, of course. You're also the best dressed person in this room, I would say. But that's important because of what your company does, right? Can you talk a little bit about how an upstart company gets noticed, especially in a place as competitive as Greater China?
I may quickly explain what I'm doing right now. Viss is content and social commerce platform. This is simply just like a shoppable Instagram. For people to take picture up, they just tag on the brands that they wear. At the same time, we managed to connect with more than 4,000 merchants. We have more than 1 million products that they can do exact product recommendation or similar items recommendation. So when people see someone who wearing very nicely, they can just click to buy stuff through our merchant. So the whole platform is building up on social. So we don't have any physical stuff. So if people don't contributing on our platform, the whole business model is not going to work. So it's very competitive. So we have to get into all the social media channel. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we understand the users' needs properly. So to make sure that they contribute with us. So we give them incentive. So the incentive is like giving them exposure. So they can expose to the people that they are the stylish people. They are the fashion listers. So they can be able to be featured by the media, by the other media site. And Greater China is different because some people here are very conservative. They don't want to show off what they wear, but then they also want to look into what the other people are dressing. So it's actually have a quick, very good demand and supply balance here on the social media things.
So just taking what you said, while we were preparing for this, I quote you here, "Today, fashion is not dictated by editors." You're democratizing fashion. You started purely social, and you talked about how you went into the real world, and can you kind of share how going bricks and mortar, so to speak, has actually helped engagement and helped your platform take off?
Yeah, I think many people will hate me because I'm coming from the traditional media side. So I do believe that today fashion is not dictated by the fashion editor. What they're talking about, what is the fashion for next season, because people don't really care about what's happening next season. They just want to know what should I wear tomorrow or what should I wear today to impress the people. So what we want to do is we want people to showcasing what they wear today. So together we democratize the style. So we know what people like in Taipei, we know what people like in Singapore, we know what people dressing in Beijing, even people dressing in Shanghai is different from Beijing. So they democratizing what they are doing, and then they have a trend there. The other people can follow tomorrow. So I think this is very key for the people who contribute, because they know that for contributing one picture a day, they democratize the things together. So this is especially important in China because we're talking about democracy. The other things that we mentioned about earlier is we start from social, but we go back to physical. So many people have a physical territories, and then they go back to the social media world. But what we see is we create fashion event every month in different city. So we invite our users to come. So most of them, 90% of them never see each other before, but they just communicated virtually. But the first time they see each other, they set up their hair, they dress very lovely. They just want to impress the people there. So after they physically meeting each other, the next day, our engagement level go up by 1,000 times. They commenting with each other, they are attracting more. So I just feel that we always feel that social is happening on the virtual world, But actually, social is community. Community need physical touch, like human touch. So we have to be, so for us, we are very careful on how we bring the virtual and physical world together to engage the users better.
Mark, I wonder if you could talk a little bit, you're about 8 months into your job, you said, how you wrest control away from the mothership and just make everyone realize that you are in a different region, and actually there's not a region, there's all these individual countries. And you talk about the job that you've kind of had to, that you've had in trying to create messaging for all of these different hotels in all of these different countries in the entire region.
Sure. So obviously, as you're all aware, I'm responsible for marketing the biggest hotel corporation on earth, which has historically run from mothership in North Virginia. Everything was created there. The agencies were in New York and Washington, D.C., and it was very much a case of global regional translation of whatever was created. And of course, quite naturally, most of that creativity was centered around the sentiments of the North American market, because that's our home, that's where all the decision makers are based, that's where the significant base of our actual operations is. My role was created because the organization understood that we'd got to a tipping point in the world now, and many of you who follow the hospitality sector will know that last year saw China become the #1 source market for travelers in the world for the first time, and the US for the first time not be the #1, and that is going to continue. And my role is effectively to move from this translation era that we've come from and actually have independence from mothership to build messages for a region, by a region, in a region, and be curated in the region on an ongoing basis. Clearly, of course, with the global brand, we still have to make sure that there's commonality in there, but we need to represent the cultural, emotional, and consumer mindset of the audience in each of those sub-regions within Asia-Pacific. And to the point that you raised, it isn't just Asia-Pacific. And my heaviest job in the first 6 months was educating people that there wasn't just differences between China, Korea, Japan, Australia, and so on. But actually, within each of those markets, and especially up in China, there are, to the point made before, that Shanghai is a different market to Guangzhou, is a different market to Chengdu, is a different market to Hong Kong. And you need different actions and behaviors in there.
Right, but just to follow up quickly on this, traditionally, messaging for hotels is, oh, look at the happy people in the lobby, and what a beautiful room, and oh, look, there's a swimming pool. How are you guys messaging differently now using social media?
So we're on a big journey. I inherited effectively 3,000 active sites across social media platforms just in Asia Pacific, because each brand had, each country had a site, we had each hotel having sites, we had departments within the hotel, so whether that was weddings or the different dining outlets, all having their own sites and all doing their own thing. So the first thing is we've identified all of those, and now it's about coming up with an aggregated ecosystem, because we still want to have the independence of voice. But what the other thing we're key to do is also break the mindset that, your question was brilliant at the start. It's not about Facebook and Twitter in this part of the world. It's about Weibo, WeChat, Kakao, Line. They're the big areas that we're spending a lot of time with those platforms, understanding how their platforms work, what their strategies are to develop their business, and how we can participate in that for the benefit of our business spread. That's on the one side. The other side, which is something we've moved more rapidly towards deployment, and this is day 15 right now of active, is our entire new domestic campaign in Japan called Play Hilton. Is actually user-driven content. So you're all very familiar with hotel creative the world over. It's beautifully created video and photo content that shows you what your room may look like, what the lobby looks like, so on and so forth. But we all know that actually you all spend more time decisioning hotels on things like TripAdvisor or Dao if you're in China. What we're trying to do is create our own branded content on that same basis. So the entire website for Play Hilton Japan now has its content fed from user-generated content on Vine that are little vignette videos of their real experiences on our properties and in the destinations that our properties serve.
Thanks. Damien, so you came in and you dropped a bombshell. I was going to ask you about the latest campaign or what you were doing with electronics, and then you said to me, you have a bigger goal in mind. Can you talk a little bit about how Philips is being disruptive with its content creation?
I mean, I'll tell you about a couple of things I believe. I don't believe in advertising, and I don't believe in campaigns. I also don't believe that people want a relationship with a brand. I don't. I believe that people want a relationship with people behind the brands. I mean, with Philips, for example, do you really want a relationship with the company that sells you the iron, or the ironing board, or the rice cooker, or the medical equipment? Probably not. But we have so many interesting people that you do want to build a relationship with. And my epiphany was that you don't build a relationship by actually talking about the brand or developing platforms on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever. I mean, what tends to happen is if you put a brand on one of those platforms, people gravitate towards customer service. They go there to complain. And in the telco industry, it's roughly 40% of people go to social platforms to complain about something. If you're someone like a Singtel or StarHub, that could be 70 to 80%. If you're a bank, you're in big trouble because most of it is about people complaining about something else. So you've got to focus on this idea of conversations. So what we're doing is focusing on not products and not our sectors, but conversations that matter to people. And how do we play a role in that conversation? So we're looking at a program called the Conversation Engine to look at how we create content on a daily basis. Not just one piece of content, but also aggregate other people's content, comment on conversations, jump in on hashtags when people are talking about major themes that we want to own. And right now we're looking at conversations like haze and poor air quality, really topical in areas like Southeast Asia and China. And for us, the payoff is that we sell air purifiers, but also we have a strong position on respiratory illnesses like asthma, and we want to actually prevent and cure those. If you look at something like Internet of Things, we can play a very strong thought leadership role in terms of what medical technology is doing. Wouldn't it be amazing if your first ultrasound of your unborn baby can be sent to you with one click of the button via email? That's the kind of thing that gets people excited, and that's the kind of thing you want to have a conversation around. But also, if you look at a very topical point like living to 115 years old, living older and living well, that's important to lots of different people. I mean, if you're young, it's about fitness, it's about health. If you're older, it's about treating chronic diseases. If you're getting very old, it's about having quality of life and access to healthcare. So what we're going to do is look at avoiding all kinds of advertising, look at what we're eventually going to try to do is phase out campaigns and focus on always-on conversations around things that matter to our customers.
That is disruptive. Stephanie, you were just raising your eyebrows. So you talked a little bit about the, what you guys are doing with the documentaries. What kind of conversations do you have with your customers?
I guess conversations with customers are an interesting thing. I mean, one of the things we discovered in some research we did last year was that, our sales cycles are really, really long. It can take months and months. Our customers are spending, millions, sometimes billions on infrastructure and things with us. And we were finding that, in fact, we weren't even in the conversation. We were finding that, our research was showing that our customers could get, probably 3/4 of the way through their decision process before they even talk to an Ericsson salesperson. So what we did is we decided to empower our people to have conversations online because that's where our customers were. So what we did is and at the same time we had HR policies that were there for a good reason to tell people what they couldn't do and the repercussions of doing the wrong thing online. So people were really scared and nervous. So we actually trained our people up to be able to have conversations on topics that relate to the business and that are business challenges that our customers haven't solved yet. So we produce a lot of content around, how do you monetize mobile broadband, what's the strategy that's going to work for video and things like that. And then once our salespeople and our technical experts, I guess going to your point as well, once they have access to that content, they can then put it out through their social channels and say, hey guys, what do you think? I think that this is a really interesting point of view. And then the customers come back. And because they want to get involved in a conversation about, we don't know how to make money out of video. It's eating up all our bandwidth, but what do people want? But what we did find from that as well was that those are good conversations to have, but people don't want to have them with the sales guys. So our intent at the first instance was to try to get the salespeople more connected and viewed as thought leaders. But what we found was that the customers want to talk to the real people behind the scenes. They want to talk to the experts, the specialists, the people that don't necessarily knock on their door. And so that was a really big learning for us.
If I can hop back to you, Damien. So can you talk a little bit more about how you're structuring this the conversation engine is what you called it, right? So you have money, and instead of putting it into campaigns, you're putting it into the conversation engine. What am I going to see if I walk into Philips? How do I know it's there?
Sure. Well, it's a pilot at the moment we're doing in Singapore, so it's about three-quarters of the size of this space here. What we're going to do is actually have in the center a digital command center, so social media metrics, marketing metrics, brand metrics, and ideally sales metrics as well. We'll have agency co-locations, so we invited our 3 key partners, Ogilvy, Fleischmann, and Carrard, to actually put headcount in there. Of course, the idea is that if we have a retained headcount already, why not ask them to come in between half a day and 5 days a week? We don't want them to kind of lose their agency identity, but what we do want to do is actually get them focused less on their agency and less on a brief and more on actually being part of a team around one of the conversations. We're also going to have an integrated video and production studio, so if you want to kind of do live to YouTube videos or actually take some photos, make a Vine, put something up on Instagram, we put the facilities in place to do that. Also, we'll have an editorial war room, so it'll be lit by obviously Philips lighting, but it's going to look nice, and we'll have a 12-month editorial calendar by 5 conversations actually across a gigantic wall.
And in terms of kind of degrees, so you create video content, but it's not just Vines, right? There's going to be longer features, things like that. Yeah. How do you decide when to bring something out or how to grade something?
Well, we have 3 tiers of categorization. So tier 1 content we define as quarterly or annual content. So by team, we would say an example would be a 2-hour documentary or maybe a research report on the aging population effect on healthcare. Stuff that matters, stuff that people want. So we would say, okay, maybe 4 pieces of tier 1 content. Tier 2 content is what we normally do at the moment. So a media release, a 5-minute YouTube video, something that takes a few days or a week or so to put together. And we want to distribute that out. And tier 3 content is everyday content, a status update, a tweet, a Vine, and so on. So we'd put targets around each. So maybe 4 pieces of tier 1 per team, 200 pieces of tier 2, and maybe 500 pieces of tier 3 by team. Now, where it gets a little bit hazy and where we start to kind of, the pulse quickens and we got to get out of breath is that we want to actually decentralize and actually give each of these teams a budget and let them figure out what content they should create. So we trust them based on 3 agencies coming together with Philips' team leader that they will create the best, most relevant content. Now, there's a caveat to that. I'm going to force them at 9 o'clock every morning to come into the middle of the digital command center and see how their content is performing. They will compete with each other to create the best, most effective, most shared, I hate viral, but yeah, definitely the most viral or definitely the most impactful pieces of content.
It's untrod territory. What happens if it doesn't work? What's your safety net?
There's no safety net. So either I'm hopefully going to get promoted next year or I'm out of a job. We'll see how it goes.
Ivy, you guys are still fairly new, but the way you've gone about things, you're heavily into social media and also chat for that matter. Can you talk a little bit about reaching the customer through the audience through WeChat? A lot of people in this room know about WeChat, but in China it sort of has a life of its own, and including its own economy. What are the expectations there, and how do you deliver on them?
So we heavily focusing on commerce. So we want to use content to trigger people to buy stuff emotionally and impulsively. We don't want people to do pricing comparison. And WeChat is definitely the best tool in China right now because like basically everyone have a WeChat account. And when they first build it, they already link with all the payment systems. So it's so easy that like you just like one click and then you can buy every single things. You are amazed that like the faster growing WeChat commerce in China is grocery. So people just like order what they want to eat at night. So they like before you place an order before noon, so you get the dish by 4. So they cut every single things and then you just go home and then put it in microwave or you just cook it. And then like this is a whole ecosystem that people building on the WeChat system. And one thing that I mentioned earlier, I truly believe like social media is virtual and physical. So when we look at WeChat, we also think that this is a virtual tool. But then actually, few retail store in China is actually building up an O2O solution. So they're using WeChat to attract people to go to store to buy stuff. So when they get in there, like they will send you a message. If you have 3 people coming to buy the same items, I give you 10% off. So when you go into the store, 3 people together, they don't even need to go to the cashier. So they just like go to pick the stuff, pay by WeChat, and then they go. So the whole social media things like now, virtual, physical, all together, all mixed up. So that's what to talk about. So that's what we keep talking about, the O2O experience on the social world. I think WeChat can definitely leading this.
Mark, what about Hilton? So, I mean, you said it's about Lion, Kakao, Weibo, WeChat. It's very different from kind of crafting and having beautiful art on Facebook or dashing off a telegraphic message. How do you engage people differently? What's your strategy on these chat programs?
So the strategy is the point we were talking about before we came on stage. It's all about content. Content has to be engaging and it has to be purposeful. And look, if we look at our sites right now, because we're in transition, if we look at most of what our comp set does in the industry, it's all the same thing. It's nicely produced, structured content that's expected. You know, dishes from the restaurant, shots across the pool, sunrise out of the presidential suite. But that really isn't telling stories. There's nothing anybody can stimulate and participate on. So very much like the example we're undertaking in Japan with the Play Hilton program, is we have basically an internal strapline, which is our stage, your story. We're simply providing the best possible platform for you to have a unique individual experience. And that experience is not within the confines of the 4 walls of our property or our restaurant or our event and conference space. It's the city, the destination that you've chosen to go to. So we believe that how do we become more effective in competition? And we have 2 types of competitors. With the natural competitors, like this very fine property and hotel brand that we're in today. And we're very blessed in hospitality. We're all very equal. So actually, how do you stand out? You have to have a purpose and a meaning. And ours is, to fill the world with the warmth and light of hospitality at the big high-level stage. But then how do you create tangible elements of that? And we believe it's allowing people to tell their emotional journeys and stories that they have in hotels, both good, bad, rich or poor. The second thing, though, which is very critical for us in this marketplace, is the threat of our entire industry being commoditized. So use China again as an example. The fastest growing booking channel for all hotel groups is Ctrip. Ctrip is effectively a price comparison and discounting platform. That's all it offers. I mean, they talk of other things, but fundamentally that's what it is. If we allow them to take control of our destiny, and how they, for those of you who've never used Ctrip as an example, they control and mandate specifically what images you can put up. So it ends up a case of a picture of the outside of the building, 2 rooms, the pool, 1 restaurant, end of story. You can't tell any stories, you can't position your brand proposition, you've got no voice of the community. It becomes a price comparison. So we need to build strength to draw people away from those sites in China. And again, that's a challenge because we know in Chinese culture, the marketplace price comparison is embedded as a normalized behavior. We've got to draw them away by providing them platforms to speak for themselves. Now, there is an inherent risk, because as Damien talked about, we're the same. Guess what? Somebody has a bad experience. You guys are all on TripAdvisor every day. That's what people love to share, the bad experience. So we've got to do it in a way that it isn't actually, if you're being very frank, opening up for that customer service treatment. That needs to be dealt with in other ways. And that's why, for example, with the case point I'm using of Play Hilton, we're using Vine. It's to share an emotional story that's visual. And again, we talked about this at the start. I'm a great believer in these platforms that the visual content is the most powerful potential, certainly for our industry, way above words, which is why things like Twitter on a global scale we're not overly bothered about, because we just don't feel it's a vehicle we can use, whereas the visual platforms, I honestly believe we do, and it's in fact why I love what the Viss platform is all about. It's letting pictures do the work. And allowing individual identity to come through.
So if I can just kind of cut through this a little bit, the value proposition I understand most clearly is yours, is Viss Mobile's. you show me something, I have this emotional feeling, I want to buy it. It seems a lot less direct when I'm looking at a documentary about Myanmar, or when I'm watching a 6 or 8 second video, or having a conversation. Is all this worth it to move product? It's experimental, so you're putting your professional career on the line, but it's also, like in the electronics area, it's very low margin. Does it really make a difference, do you think, in the customer's mind when they're buying a rice cooker or an iron?
Well, I think I can speak on behalf of Ericsson as well. I mean, when you're selling like $100 million solution, you don't do it by having a Vine or a tweet. I mean, that's not the reality. You need to build trust over a long period of time. You actually need to engage your sales force, and you need to make sure that they've got the right kind of tools to get there. And in fact, most vendors and most customers actually find you. And you actually need to put yourself in a very good position where they come in with a level of trust, they know who you are. So, lead generation, thought leadership, that's where it's all about for B2B. On the consumer side, I'd say it's the same as well. So if you look at a rice cooker, I mean, you've got 10 other brands to choose from when you walk into a department store. Would you rather go in and look at the one you trust, or the one from China that you know nothing about? It might be 10% cheaper, but it might break in 3 weeks as well. So building trust, and whether it be through a conversation, whether it be through social platforms or influencers or whatever, I think is absolutely critical.
Excellent. Mark, I'm wondering what you think.
It comes back to the point I made before, that we have a choice in our industry, that we can be led down the path of the race to the bottom by being commoditized. It's a bed, it's a bathroom, it's a place to bunk down, or actually focus on the origination of what we did as a hospitality industry, which was to go beyond that and say, actually, we provide environments for you to build the emotional experiences that you want to have, whether that's from a business context or whether that's from a personal and leisure context or a life event context. And that's a truism not just for Hilton worldwide, it's a truism for all of our competitors as well. In order to do that, you have to tell stories. You can't get there any other way. It's not about selling a physical entity with a tick list. It's about creating and stimulating imagination for consumers. Our industry is pretty simple at the basics. There's the explore phase for somebody, there's a book phase, and there's a stay phase. What we've got to do a lot better job at is the explore phase, and really building a rapport for somebody so that they want to, when they make a decision about where they want to journey to, maybe they'll make that decision with our assistance, maybe they've already decided where they're going to, but then it's the choices they want to use us as their platform for that experience. That's what we've got to work very hard on, and I fundamentally believe that social media platforms are a fantastic opportunity for us to leverage.
Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, social, enables a conversation that you can't necessarily have behind a closed door all the time. Our customers are facing so much change. Our CEO was speaking earlier this year, and I think his comment was that the pace of change will never be this slow again. If you look at what digital and social and internet and mobile, everything is changing, lots of other industries. So we need to be much more active to help our customers navigate through that change. And the second reason that social is really important for us is that when our customers are making these huge multi-million, billion-dollar decisions, it's not just a product evaluation that they're deciding on, they're also trusting a team. And our own research tells us that they find that our people are the most expert, they're the most competent, they're the most capable of managing these huge, big, high-risk projects. So by allowing our people to be much more active and engaged directly with customers, that helps build the trust as well.
We've talked for about a half hour. I'd like to open it up to the audience so we can hear from the people who have questions. So could you please, it's a little bit hard for us to see, but if you'll put your hand up, we will send a microphone around. I see someone up front right here.
Hi, I'd like to speak to the lady. I have a question for you with regards to, you running social from a commerce perspective. What's been your success rate? I mean, does every post that you put in result in a revenue conversion?
No, honestly, there's no way that every post that we can get a conversion. So when we start 1.5 years ago, so we keep trying on either one post we should associate with 4 products or 5 products, there's a lot to learn. So when giving users more choices, actually the conversion rate is much lower. So we experiment. Each poll, we should like only associate with 3 products. So from the last 1 year, the conversion rate is actually increasing from so we're starting from 0, definitely. So we grow to 0.49%. And for the last month, the conversion rate is around 2.6%. So it's actually quite high compared with the other things. So one thing that Adam mentioned earlier, so we seem to be having a very clear model because like we build from there. So the build design for social media is everyone think that this is very important. But then the ugly side of social media is also it takes a lot to experiment it. So it's a lot of failure way. So I don't know how many of you there are founder or CEO or working for startup. Can I? Yeah, so not many people in startups. So because we know that we don't have resources like the big brands to experiment. So we are there. So we try it, make mistake, and then we move fast. So this is how we learn.
Other questions from the audience, please? Okay.
I have a question for Stephanie. I'm just curious how Ericsson commits to the sort of non-hard sell approach. So for example, I watched Press Pause Play. I thought it was fantastic, but I had zero idea Ericsson had anything to do with it. So I'm just curious whether you guys measure it and how you measure it.
Yeah, that's a really
thanks.
interesting point because we've had a few films where we've chosen consciously not to have Ericsson highly visible, so they're commissioned by Ericsson. And in fact, when that film was entered in different film festivals, it was entered under the production company's name that took the brief. And it's important to note that when they've done these films, we haven't driven the script either, so they've had creative control. So in terms of how you measure the impact, it's actually really tough. I mean, in terms of the shares, we saw quite a high volume online. But the real value to us is actually the customer response. So what we find coming out of that is that our investors better understand why we're in TV, because since then we've made a number of acquisitions and we're a really big player actually in supporting broadcast and also supporting operators in their TV strategy. So it's a bit more qualitative. So we're finding that people understand our business strategy is clearer, that helps our share price. Our customers see that we really understand the challenges that they're facing. And that we're a relevant talking partner. But I don't actually have I can't tell you that it generated 20% of this or 15% of that, but it certainly improved the engagement and shortened our sales cycles.
Other questions from the audience? See someone further back there, also in the middle.
Hi, my question is towards Damien. I think regarding social conversations or engagement, one of the traps that most of the companies fall into is to have a plan of having one post daily. But I think it's more about quality conversations rather than just putting out a post because you have to engage with customers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one post per day is a bit silly. Also, the social media model is fundamentally broken. You know, when you have, most companies fall into the trap of trying to have a Facebook page, a Twitter account, buy the brand. And again, I've asked this in many jobs, so why would you ever go to that page? It makes no sense generally. And the only 2 reasons you ever go to a Facebook page, buy a brand, if it's, say, a tech company, is if you're broken or want to buy it. If you're broken, it's customer service. If you want to buy it, you expect special offers and discounts. When you look at things like, but then if you flip it and do it by conversation or passion point, there's 2 sides of the equation. The top side is where you actually look at other people's conversation. For example, if I'm talking about haze or air quality, I would map out who's actually using this SG Haze hashtag on Twitter. And forums, what are people saying about haze? What are people doing in terms of the N95 masks that have just been given out by the Singapore government? If I go to media properties like Yahoo, what are they saying in comment sections? What are they doing on major media publications such as Wall Street Journal? Is there any kind of major articles about that? Can we share them? So what I'd rather do is focus on sharing other people's conversations or getting involved in those conversations rather than trying to do a tacky selling of my products. But of course, there's a flip side of that. We do have own properties. So there'll be Philips Facebook, Philips Twitter, Philips YouTube, Philips Instagram. What we want to do is actually selectively, in a different type of style, talk about how maybe an air purifier can resolve that problem. And maybe link back to the content we see on, say, Wall Street Journal or Straits Times or Yahoo. Or reference in a comment section that we do have a product portfolio or we've done a thought leadership report. But frankly, I think there's no limit to the amount of content you should put out there, but I would go with a decentralized, massive ecosystem of as much content which is relevant as possible. Forget one post a day. Doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
I'd echo that as well. I mean, from my perspective, completely in our business model, we have to allow the people at every individual property, and we've got 4,668 as of today globally, to be able to speak with a voice amongst their local community, because many of them are community hubs for entertaining, as well as to global audiences and share their opinions. Now, of course, that takes guidelines and control, and it's one of the things we do is say, you know, these are topics we don't comment on, for obviously for legal reasons. But outside of that, we want to be the voice of that destination and share and amplify, again, not just our story, but stories that are relevant to that time and that space and that place.
Actually, just to add to that, one of our most popular channels doesn't have an Ericsson name on it either, Technology for Good. And it's our content, but it's a lot of other people's content as well. And interestingly, when we're hiring, and in fact, we were doing a recruitment in Myanmar last year, a market that hasn't really had much access to internet, right? And nearly all the graduates we interviewed knew about Technology for Good. And that was one of the core reasons they wanted to join us.
And the other point I would add is, of course, it's dependent on your channels to market, because I completely understand what Damien is doing, and it makes absolute sense for him, because as he said, it's the individual walking into the department store and got a choice of 10 rice cookers, and how do they have a trust factor to pick one off the shelf when they all look largely identical? For myself, it's different. I need people to come through my channels that I own, but allow them to speak freely, because my challenge is to actually draw customers to purchase my product through my digital channels as a preference, because we don't tend to buy holidays on the high street anymore. It tends to be in the digital space. And I have a desire for them to buy directly from me rather than to go into the price comparison and aggregator travel sites, because from a profitability perspective, that's less favorable for me. So I think the absolute truism is allow people to express themselves, allow it to be fluid, and it's not this ridiculously calendarized approach, which we've all witnessed and been treated to by brands that we've engaged with for learning. But there is a difference, I think, around where you are willing and to what extent you're willing to play in owned or third parties platforms, depending on your, ultimately, from my view, that decision is down to where your sales come from, that determines the need to be in control otherwise of the overall platform.
Thanks. I thought I saw a hand further back in the middle. All the questions seem to be coming from the inquisitive middle section. Please, go ahead.
Hi, to Damien. Just asking, like, you have a very interesting point on create the brand conversation around your product that matter to consumer life. But in the case that, like, if the product itself is not really in the interest of consumer, how you have a point of view on create the content or conversation?
Okay, so if I understand that correctly, you're saying if there are products that are not something that is not well known in the community, or they're not popular, how do you have a conversation around that? Yeah. There's always something that makes sense to the community. There's always something that makes sense to your customers. What you got to figure out is the right way of actually positioning it. That's why I kind of say that we're going for a conversation approach, not a product-centric approach. For example, I could never have a conversation about ironing boards or irons. No one wants to engage in that conversation. It's a really boring thing to talk about. I personally love irons. That's actually how I got my job. I actually talked to my boss about ironing for 20 minutes. She thought I was really passionate. But again, that was the only example I've ever heard about ironing that makes sense. But when you look at some of those less popular categories, there's something that might make sense from a consumer standpoint. Ironing is not really about ironing, but you might want to have a conversation about what the perfect home is. You might want to look at things like how do you set up your kids' room so it's an environmentally friendly space, that it's a learning center, that they're breathing clean air. And then you actually start to insert a product message around ironing, which does make sense at that point. But you can't lead with the product, but you can introduce it subtly into a conversation that does matter to people. And I guess you're going to ask how you find out what matters to customers, just ask them. So do a bit of research about what's important to them and somehow try to align that back to your product portfolio.
Anyone else? I think we have time for one more. I see someone waving in the right, all the way stage right. There we go.
I was interested in the discussions in the panel about the purpose behind your businesses, whether it's about ultimate outcomes of hospitality or fashion and lifestyle adding to your life, or Burmese consumers being more connected, improving your home. I was also interested in the question about let's be careful about the negative chat that comes through social media. And I was interested to know your point of view on how social media conversations actually help better deliver on the purpose behind a business and that focus about why brands are in business to actually positively enhance people's lives in some way. I was interested to know how you see that social conversation as a real positive to, if you like, keep us all focused on the reason that brands are there for people beyond just basic products.
You want to start?
It's a really interesting point, and one of my personal positions on brands and brand stories is actually understand where you have the right to speak and the areas of knowledge that you have as a business that gives you the right to opinion and participate in social causes. It always irritates me when I see brands just jumping on the bandwagon, so to speak, and you're kind of like, why are they associated with this cause? It's nothing to do with their area of knowledge or specialisms. So from my perspective, in that terms, it's about, as I said, in the rules that we've given our teams down at the local individual property level, these are areas we feel we have the right to speak on that relates to us as a brand having a mission around spreading the warmth and light of hospitality. If it's not related to that, then we don't have a right to speak in that arena, and we shouldn't be opinioning, in my opinion.
I think we are out of time, and I want to thank Mark, Ivy, Stephanie, and Damien for the insight and also for the passionate discussion about ironing. If you'd like to
Talk to me later. I'll get you a discount.
Thank you very much. This was informative. It was entertaining. It was interesting, and we all got to raise our hands a little bit in the audience. Thank you, and have a pleasant rest of your day.
Thank you.